Donald Trump has announced the names he wants to fill some of the most influential jobs in the country. But many of his picks have been criticized for a lack of expertise or their radical and sometimes dangerous views. Here's a look at some of Trump's most controversial cabinet picks and what their appointments could mean for the future of the country. First up, we've got Pete Hegseth, Trump's pick for Secretary of Defense. He's the person who now runs the Pentagon. As a major in the National Guard, Hegseth previously served in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Guantanamo Bay before becoming a right-wing talk show host.
Trump isn't going in to play politics. He's going to fight even harder, smoking out every corrupt anti-American swamp creature in D.C.
He co-hosted the daily morning show Fox and Friends, frequently described as Trump's favorite show, where he often defended Trump and advocated for a conservative cultural shift in the U.S. military.
Pretty soon you got a Pentagon full of sycophants worried about DEI and trans issues instead of, I don't know, we might have to fight China. What are we gonna do with that? Throw our pronouns at them?
In 2024, Hegseth released a book titled War on Warriors, in which he describes the US military as woke and proposes purging members of the general class who support diversity and inclusion principles.
General, admiral, whatever that was involved in any of the DEI woke shit has gotta go.
Something he already appears to have started doing in his new role.
President Trump has just fired the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And Secretary Pete Hegseth had previously called for General Brown's firing because of his, quote, woke focus.
Hegseth also made this controversial claim about women in the military.
I'm straight up just saying we should not have women in combat roles.
He later backtracked on this during his confirmation hearing.
You say, we need moms, but not in the military, especially in combat units.
And I would point out, I've never disparaged women serving in the military.
That's not all, though. Hegseth has also faced allegations of sexual assault, excessive alcohol use, and financial mismanagement at his veteran-focused nonprofits, which he has strongly denied. Since taking office, Hegseth has also banned trans people from joining the military, and he stopped the use of resources to celebrate Black History Month.
Identity months are dead at the Department of Defense.
And in a development critics say is even more worrying, Hegseth has fired the top lawyer for each of the Army, Navy, and Air Force. But if Hegseth feels underqualified to lead the Pentagon, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is an even more alarming choice for Department of Health. Former presidential candidate and member of an American political dynasty, RFK Jr. actually spent much of his career as an environmental attorney, taking on large corporations.
We recognize that nature enriches us.
But over the last several years, RFK Jr. has become one of America's most prominent vaccine skeptics, often peddling conspiracy theories.
There's no vaccine that is, safe and effective. I do believe that autism does come from vaccines. Blacks have a much more robust immune system than whites.
This man is now in charge of the country's health, which includes oversight of the very agencies that he has spent years battling through lawsuits and public campaigns, like the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. The numerous unscientific claims that he's made in the past were thrown at him during his confirmation hearing.
Blacks need fewer antigens than...
This is so dangerous.
So you get the same measles vaccine.
Mr. Kennedy, with all due respect, that is so dangerous.
Vaccines do not cause autism. Do you agree with that?
As I said, I'm not going to go into HHS with any preordained...
I asked you a simple question, Bobby. The studies all over the world say it does not. What do you think?
It's not just vaccines. Kennedy has been at the center of numerous other controversies. He's been accused of sexual misconduct and also of staging a prank involving a dead bear cub in Central Park.
I said, let's go put the bear in Central Park and we'll make it look like he got hit by a bike.
But none of this has prevented Trump from sticking by his nominee. Kennedy has also earned his boss's praise for suggesting clearing out entire departments at the FDA and planning to fire 600 employees at the National Institutes of Health, the country's top funder of academic research. Another wild card is Tulsi Gabbard. She's Trump's pick to oversee the country's various spy agencies, despite having been publicly questioned over her affinity for foreign dictators. The former Democratic House member from Hawaii,
Donald Trump is unfit to serve as president.
Gabbard served in the Army National Guard for more than 2 decades. She switched party allegiances in 2022 after an unsuccessful bid for the Democratic nomination in 2020.
That I'm proud to stand here with you today, President Trump, and announce that I'm joining the Republican Party.
Security experts have pointed out events in the past that could compromise Gabbard, including a visit to Syria in 2017 to meet with the dictator Bashar al-Assad.
She took the word of Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad against the assessments of our own Department of Defense. She denied that Assad used chemical weapons against his own people.
And her habit of repeating Kremlin talking points.
Ukraine isn't actually a democracy. There are 25 to 30 U.S.-funded biolabs in Ukraine. By coming to an agreement that Ukraine will be a neutral country, no military alliance with NATO.
One of Vladimir Putin's mouthpiece TV channels even took to referring to Gabbard as Russia's girlfriend. All of this makes it probable that some European defense agencies may be less likely to share info with the US.
It also leads me to question whether you can develop the trust necessary to give our allies confidence.
What makes all of this especially worrying to security experts is that as Director of National Intelligence, she'll oversee 18 intelligence agencies, including the CIA, the FBI, and the NSA. And Gabbard has previously ruthlessly criticized the US intelligence community she will now lead.
The FBI and intelligence agencies were politicized by his opponents to undermine his presidency and falsely portray him as a puppet of Putin.
Slated to lead the FBI specifically is Kash Patel, a deep state conspiracy theorist, and again, a virulent critic of the Bureau.
The FBI is part of what he calls the deep state conspiracy against the president-elect and his allies.
Kash Patel, who has also authored a children's book, actually, that stars Donald Trump as king.
He's threatened to fire its top echelons, and he's called for major reform within the organization. That could include shutting down its headquarters.
I'd shut down the FBI Hoover building on day one and reopening the next day as a museum of the deep state.
Patel was a lawyer before serving on the House Intelligence Committee during Trump's first term. In a 2023 book, Government Gangsters, Patel wrote a now infamous list of officials and public figures that he alleged to be dedicated to undermining Trump, calling them corrupt actors. Critics fear that Patel, one of Trump's most loyal lieutenants, will weaponize the FBI against the president's political opponents. During his confirmation hearing, Patel tried to distance himself from some of his more problematic past comments.
Did you say that the FBI headquarters should be shut down and reopened as a museum of the deep state?
If the best attacks on me are going to be false accusations and grotesque mischaracterizations.
It is his own words. It is not some conspiracy. It is what Mr. Patel actually said.
But he did little to reassure critics, dodging questions about whether he would use his power to target Trump's critics.
Vice President Harris, Kamala Harris, or General Milley or anyone otherwise will not be subjected to an FBI investigation that doesn't meet the rigorous standards of the Constitution.
To lead the Department of Education, Trump has picked Linda McMahon, a billionaire professional wrestling mogul, and co-founder of World Wrestling Entertainment, or WWE, with her husband, Vince McMahon. Now, Trump has known the McMahons since at least the early 2000s, making appearances on their wrestling shows, including to shave Vince McMahon's head. Oh no! In 2009, Linda McMahon stepped down from her position as WWE's chief executive to enter politics. A Trump loyalist, she served in his cabinet in his first administration. She has limited experience in education. Sure, she was on the Connecticut State School Board for about a year. She then stepped down to launch an ultimately unsuccessful bid for elective office. But this lack of experience might be a feature, not a bug, as they say in Silicon Valley. As Trump has in the past promised to close the department, he's picked McMahon to run and to return much of its powers to the states.
I told Linda, I hope you do a great job and put yourself out of a job.
Trump hasn't explained how he would close the agency, which was created by Congress in 1979 and would likely require action from Congress to dismantle. But McMahon has shown she would be a willing participant.
The president has given a very clear directive that he would like to look in totality at the Department of Education and believes that the bureaucracy of it should be closed, that we should return education to our states.
In her confirmation hearing, McMahon also refused to say whether Black history courses would be allowed under Trump's executive order targeting diversity.
If you're running an African American history class, could you perhaps be in violation of this court order, of this executive order?
I'm not quite certain, and I'd like to look into it further and get back to you on that.
But perhaps the person we should be paying the most attention to is Russell Vought, who Democrats have called
incredibly dangerous.
He believes in an imperial presidency where the president is king, laws are just suggestions, and the Constitution is irrelevant.
He's one of the architects of the controversial Project 2025.
The authoritarian blueprint for dismantling federal agencies in the next Republican presidency.
Critics are calling it the fascist playbook.
And Trump's pick to head the Office of Management and Budget. It might have a boring name, but it's more important than it sounds. This office acts as a nerve center for the White House, overseeing federal agencies and administering the budget. Vought recently drew criticism after a video of him from an event hosted by his think tank surfaced, where he said he wants federal workers to be in trauma.
We want the bureaucrats to be traumatically affected. We want, when they wake up in the morning, we want them to not want to go to work.
These words echo a view Vought has talked about for a while, that the president should have direct control over all the federal agencies and their independence should be tamed.
80% of my time is working on the plans of what's necessary to take control of these bureaucracies.
One of his quotes that best sums it up is from Project 2025. He said Trump will need to bend or break the bureaucracy to the presidential will. Vought's think tank has also recommended policies such as invoking the Insurrection Act to quell protests and stop immigration at the southern border, and doing away with the Impoundment Control Act, which limits the president's ability to temporarily block funds that Congress has already approved. Vought has also openly embraced Christian nationalism, the political movement that seeks to infuse Christianity into public life and government.
I think you have to rehabilitate Christian nationalism, block funding for Planned Parenthood.
This will be Vought's second time in the position, and already he's made his mark. He's been explicitly linked by the White House press secretary to a memo instructing federal agencies to freeze all grant funding. This cut off thousands of programs, including ones supporting low-income Americans, like Head Start and Meals on Wheels. But one of his main goals this time will be to push through a key policy he actually failed at last time.
He was also repeatedly asked about his support of replacing career civil servants across agencies and firing them and replacing them with political appointees who would put President Trump first.
If a battle plan is out there that will do what he wants, there are the people like me that have his trust that will be able to get it to him in whatever position.
So, for those keeping count, we've got a TV host from Trump's favorite show who never rose higher than the rank of major, leading the Pentagon, a vaccine skeptic leading the health department, a woman who's repeated Kremlin talking points, heading up all US security services, a man who wrote a list of Trump's enemies and promised to pursue them, becoming the country's top cop, a wrestling mogul in charge of the country's education, and a man overseeing US government agencies who believes they should all just do the bidding of the president. The thing they have in common? A willingness to break the independence of the agencies they've been nominated to run. And honestly, it looks like that was Trump's plan all along.